if we sort of extrapolate it out and sort of think about how high the total crypto market cap could go this cycle, I think we're around 3.5 trillion at the moment. So if you think we could go to 4 trillion, 5 trillion, even higher, we're sort of looking at above that 200 billion market cap range for the crypto AI sector.
We see some of these like inciting factors that lead to a widespread mania that goes beyond just the current like CT and crypto bubble, or for sure, no, I think we're gonna hit like crazy numbers for this.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Outpost podcast. Today I'm stoked to welcome back Tang from Chain of Thought to discuss his 2025 crypto AI predictions. Tang, how are you doing today?
Hey Patty, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I think this week has been. I think the market is showing its hand. I think it's telling us that we're going to have a very good 2025 ahead. It's going to be a very interesting one, and we're excited for what's going to happen in the crypto AI space.
Definitely. The week started off a bit rough, I will say. A bit of a reality check maybe from the sort of euphoria that we saw going into the start of the year. A few red days. But we've had a nice bounce, so that's exciting. And I think a lot of people are looking forward to, things settling down in the US, the new president coming in, the new government coming in, the pro-crypto government that everyone's so excited about, and sort of seeing what happens post-inauguration. There's quite a few rumors that there's going to be, some, I guess, movements in the crypto regulation space on day one. So I'm very interested to see what Trump does.
Yeah. I think everyone's eyes are on the inauguration. I don't think anything's going to change immediately on that date. But in general, I think it just makes everyone a little bit more comfortable with crypto. And, if you think about how does the space grow, we need new people to come in, right? New capital, new builders, new people who are just interested in the space. And hopefully with friendlier regime, a more hopefully progressive regulation, we'll get people willing to cross that chasm, and give crypto a try and feel that, hey, what is happening in this industry is not just vaporware, and maybe something will really come out of all this. So it's good signs for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. What have you been up to recently? I know we had, well, I think it's still ongoing, the Solana AI hackathon. I know you're a judge, and I know you can't talk too much about it, but yeah, what's that experience been like? Any sort of surprises that you could share at all?
I think the main thing that was actually pretty surprising was just the number of entries there were for the hackathon over a very short period of time. I think if I recall, there were almost close to about 500 different projects that submitted. And then the core team sort of vetted all of them, and then they filtered them down to about 350 different projects. And then from there, they were sort of internally sort of ranked as well. And then I didn't manage to get through all of these projects, but I looked at as many of them as I could. I think it's interesting. A few things sort of came to my mind as I was looking at some of these projects as part of the hackathon. One is there's just a lot of interest around AI agents. Many of these projects were very focused on agentic kind of products. Second is that I think there were a lot of fairly similar ideas. A lot of things that people were trying to build were, for example, no code AI agent launch pads. Which I think is a great concept, because I think there are going to be a lot more people who are not technical who will be trying out building some of these agents, and there's a very big market that goes beyond just the trains of software engineers or so. So I think that's interesting, but it is a very crowded space. It's going to be competitive. You have to really stand out in some way. I think some of the ones that were yeah, there were some that were pretty interesting where they use agents in very specific verticals around things like art and culture, fashion, therapy. I think this is cool because I think we really need to get beyond the speculation and entertainment use cases into finding more productive users of AI agents. And I do hope that we'll be able to actually get some of these agents to actually work pretty well, actually generate real value, so that we can really silence all some of these like skeptics who believe that everything that's happening here is pretty much trash. And then I think another major theme I saw was around AI assistance for interacting with the blockchain. For example, making transactions, like doing swaps, where you don't actually have to sign it yourself. Basically, you chat with your assistant, in a natural language way. You tell it what to do, and then it goes and executes all the transactions for you. So there were quite a number of teams who are building something like this. So I think it'd be interesting. I think like the projects were mostly very early stage. So mostly these were like some very small teams or single founders that were experimenting with some of the ideas they had. But I think like probably among the hundreds of these, like a few of them would probably go on to do some pretty cool stuff.
Sounds super exciting to be involved. Pretty amazing how many submissions, or they were in such a short period of time. I think that was unreal, to be honest. I totally agree with you on the launchpad sort of side of things. Like it seems almost every agent that we saw initially launch is now launching a launchpad, and it does seem like quite a saturated space. It's sort of hard to tell what the moat is on each one of these different launchpads. Like, what's the unique value proposition to use this launchpad over another? Obviously, there's quite obvious ones like using different engineering or development languages for different performance and that sort of thing. But it seems like there's now more launchpads than there are developer languages. So I'm not 100% sure which ones come out on top or how you actually sort of figure that out. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see for sure. I guess before we hop into the predictions, I just want to ask a very serious question. We've sort of seen a new sort of subsector of crypto AI emerge over the past couple of weeks, the intersection of DeFi and AI. And I'm seeing a lot of polls on Twitter about how you pronounce this thing. So people are sort of spelling it DEFAI. And in my head, I'm like, I was sort of thinking about this last night. I'm like, how do I read this? And I'm reading it as DeFi AI, but that's obviously not how it's spelled. So I was actually keen to ask you, how do you think this is pronounced? Can we put this to bed right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't thought about this. This category was actually pretty interesting to me because I've never heard of this term before until like maybe 2 weeks ago when people started talking about this as a category, and then I was like, hey, what is this new? Why is there an F? Why is there an F now, right? In this, I personally, in my mind, I think I pronounce it as like DeFi in some way. Like that's how I think about it. So I'm just gonna continue to use that as long as the term continues to be trendy. But who knows? Maybe someone will find a better term for this because it's not particularly intuitive. Like you don't get what it is just by looking at the word.
Yeah, I feel like it's a pretty crypto native word. You kind of have to sort of be in the weeds to sort of put the two and two together, I think. But I've seen like different pronunciations, like people just saying no, it's just DeFi, like it's just DeFi, and then maybe like yourself where you're sort of pronouncing that I at the end a bit more, and then there's like these other ones which are like DeFi. I don't know. I kind of hope someone comes out with a new name for it because it's not working in my head.
Yeah, me too. I hope so. Like we'll figure out. Like we'll all come to some kind of consensus around this.
Maybe when there's a few more podcasts about it. Actually, I think there was a podcast with Danny Siesta. So I think that's how you pronounce his name. The founder of Hayanon and the founder of Time Wonderland and stuff. I'm not sure if you were in crypto. You were in crypto back then when Time Wonderland and Abracadabra were about, right?
Yeah, I mean, that time was a very different era. Like there were all these like anon like influencers, and people were trying to figure like who these people actually are, because they are controlling all these like hundreds of millions of like TVL and some of these DeFi protocols. Like those were wild times. But yeah, okay. I haven't seen that podcast, but cool to know that.
Yeah, I haven't actually had a chance to listen to it, so I'll have to check in on that, because I think he might have actually coined the term DeFi AI, whatever, however you say it. So maybe we should check from the man himself. But anyway, we digress. Tang, let's kick it off with one of your predictions. So this is one that I quite like. I'll get you to sort of dig into it a little bit, but the first prediction: crypto AI hits 150 billion in total market cap.
Yeah. So I first I'll caveat like most of these predictions that I came up with and I posted on our Chain of Thought website and research portal is it's take them with a pinch of salt. Like I just sat down, I thought about like what the year ahead would be like. And I wanted to sort of like make it a little bit more interesting also, and sort of like, because I tend to be a bit more rational in terms of my thinking. But I wanted to say express like how I think the year would sort of like be. And in general, I'm pretty bullish about crypto AI. I feel that among the different subsectors in crypto, besides payments and stable coins, I think AI is going to be something that will continue to capture a lot of people's attention. And the thing about AI, which is cool and what I really like about it, because it's very different from meme coins, which was really the theme of like 2024, because there is something real that is being built here. Most of the protocols and teams may not be there with the right intentions, but I can say that there are definitely a lot of very smart, talented, and credible teams that's building something that's really going to push decentralized AI forward. So if we look at the total market caps of these different sectors, like we mentioned, we were talking a little bit about DeFi just now. So DeFi, I think if I'm not wrong, it's about 8% of the total altcoin market cap today, which is pretty high. Meme coins are also about 7 to 8%. And if you look at the entire crypto AI sector, in terms of market cap, it's probably about 2 to 3%, right? So it's still it's a very tiny proportion of the entire crypto market cap. And given the amount of attention and interest we've seen over the last couple of months, and many of the teams that have been building for the last few years are probably going to be launching their tokens, launching their mainnets through the course of 2025. I definitely expect a lot more growth in this sector. And I think it could start to get much closer to the market cap of DeFi, which means that there's almost a 2 to 3x growth in the total size of the sector. Extrapolating from that, I think based on coin market caps category, I think crypto AI is probably can't remember the exact numbers from there, but if we bring it to parity to DeFi, it'll be closer to about 150 billion in terms of total market cap. So there's a lot of ways. There's quite a bit of ways to go. I think that means we're gonna have to see many new protocols with over $1 billion in market cap and valuation come up through this year. And it kind of ties into, I think, the prediction that I also put in at the bottom, where I think we're going to see quite a number of new protocols that nobody has really heard of yet actually come to play, and these are going to reach multi-billion-dollar valuations, just because purely on the size of the market. And it's very hard. I think the thing about AI is that it's very hard to put a ceiling to how high this can go. How do you put a value to intelligence? How do you put a value to the market size or total addressable market of AI, right? It's almost it's just very close towards infinity. So I think that's what is really going to drive a lot of attention and interest from the investor side of things. I'm curious what you think though. Do you think I'm being overly optimistic? Do you think is reasonable, or you think hey? It's gonna take a lot longer than we think to get there.
Well, before I address that, I guess just to add on to your point earlier, I guess we should say that these are predictions and it's not financial advice. Don't construe this as financial advice. And of course, predictions can be wrong, and they often are. But yeah, I think you're aiming a bit conservative. Personally, I think when we have the likes of the CEO and founder of Nvidia coming out and saying agents are $1 trillion market or $1 trillion opportunity, and there's very little, opportunities or options for retail investors to actually get access to this space aside from crypto. I think we could really see, a full-on speculative bubble, just in agents, and of course that's just a small subsector of crypto AI. And I also agree with you as well. I know one of your other predictions is in relation to, um, you know, other projects launching, and sorry, we haven't the fact that we haven't even seen some of these projects launch, and that they're probably going to command multi-billion-dollar market caps, and that's definitely going to influence the market cap there as well. So yeah, I'm sort of leaning that 150 billion is a bit conservative. That might just me being super bullish. But if you I've seen a few different predictions and sort of seen how they're being laid out. And one that I like the comparison, I guess. I don't think necessarily it's 100% correct, but it is around this sort of like DeFi percentage, of the, just like you mentioned before, how much DeFi tokens represent of the overall market cap. And back in, I believe, 2021, that's when it peaked, and it was around 5% of the total market cap, so not just the altcoin market cap. And if we sort of extrapolate it out and sort of think about how high the total crypto market cap could go this cycle, potentially, I think we're around 3.5 trillion at the moment. So if you think we could go to 4 trillion, 5 trillion, even higher, we're sort of looking at above that 200 billion market cap range for the crypto AI sector. So I've got my bullish hat on. I definitely think that 150 billion is more than possible. But of course, we'll see how this prediction plays out.
The thing about markets is that, and I love that bullishness. The thing about markets is that markets are like super irrational and go in cycles. And I think like if we get to some kind of like mania, like the mania that we saw in some of these sectors of the stock market, the mania that we saw with NFTs, for sure, I think we'll overshoot that, because it's going to be totally irrational. Like, they're going to be things that are worth like $1 billion, but actually has nothing behind them except like maybe a pitch deck or just some talk, right? And I'm also thinking about like what would it take for us to get to these kind of mania conditions. I think like maybe if we see things that happen in the more traditional space, for example, say OpenAI or one of these like big AI companies actually IPO, right? And retail investors actually start to realize, hey, I can invest in this, and they actually made a fair bit of money from this, and then they go look out, like, where else can I get exposure to AI that's going to double my returns or triple my returns. So I think we see some of these like inciting factors that lead to a widespread mania that goes beyond just the current like CT and crypto bubble, or for sure, no, I think we're gonna hit like crazy numbers for this.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people are calling for a bubble as well. So I don't know. Some part of me is like, if everyone's calling for a bubble, do we actually get a bubble? But yeah, I almost feel like, we're still early in this cycle, and especially when you look at what agents are doing and how they're still at this sort of stage where they're just kind of like entertainment agents, and some of them are sort of crossing the chasm to become actually useful. It still feels like we're quite early in this cycle, and like I think there's a lot of progression that we're going to see that could potentially drive that market cap even higher, from a fundamental standpoint and from a speculative standpoint as well. And because obviously markets are always forward looking, if there's something to look forward to, especially if we start, sort of advancing along this evolution path towards, more useful agents and more of these projects launching, that sort of thing. I definitely see high numbers being possible and potentially a bubble. But yeah, I think that leads nicely into another one of your predictions, which I mentioned previously, which was that 10 new crypto AI protocols will hit a 1 billion circulating valuation, and none of them have launched yet. This is I think that's like a key point of that prediction. I'd love for you to dig it in. I really love this prediction, actually.
I think that's actually what makes this year super exciting, right? Because it means that there's going to be huge opportunities. It also means that if you're able to identify um, this and figure out like what everybody is going to value a lot this year, there's just such huge opportunities to capture some of the upside from this whole sector. I think this ties in also to some of the other predictions and thoughts that I had, because if we think about like what are some of these protocols that potentially will hit $1 billion after they launch this year, I think we've seen a lot happen in the AI agent space already. We had like virtuals, we have AI 16Z. I think there's some already they're on the way to hitting $1 billion in market cap. So the AI agent software sector has sort of like played out a bit, and there are a couple of leaders that are there. For sure, it's going to change a lot, but we've already seen a couple of protocols hit that. Looking beyond AI agents, right? I think there are a few other subsectors in crypto AI that are extremely interesting. So one of these are the compute networks. So these are, I think a lot of people think of these as like a GPU marketplaces where basically you just rent your GPUs on some of these things, and maybe some of the early ones that are already live today, they are basically these, right? These are just like marketplaces where you can actually just rent compute on the cheap or provide compute and get some incentives in return. I think the next generation of these like compute protocols are going to be a lot more powerful. They're going to have a lot more utility. They're going to be a lot more developer friendly. That allows like developers to create a lot of like efficiencies in terms of like using these computes, and they'll also have some of these like built-in functionality, for example, privacy, verification, right? To make sure that every single inference that actually comes out from the AI, is exactly what you actually wanted, right? They're not cheating you with using a different model and some of those things, right? So the next generation of these compute networks are going to do a lot of these things, and they're going to start to look a lot like the next layer ones. So if you think back around like back in I think 2021, there was a lot of this like narrative around like Solana, AVAX, and Terra Luna at that time. Which was the one that was going to win out. They were all fighting for developer mindshare. They had these very big grants program. They were trying to get like developers and builders to build applications on these networks. I think we're going to see some of the same things around some of these like newer compute networks as they launch, because they're going to be very much like L1. And if you look at these L1s, people are still placing a very high premium on L1s, right? Usually they are in the billions of dollars in terms of valuations. So I think that's going to be one place that we could see some of these like newly launched compute networks start to get very high software valuations. I think some of the other sectors that we haven't really seen very much yet, but might launch a token sometime this year will be things like decentralized training. So we've seen like teams like News Research, Prime Intellect. They've done a lot of like very good stuff in terms of like figuring out how can we train AI models in a distributed way, in a decentralized way that doesn't require a very large centralized data center to do this. And as of today, there's really no way to participate in some of these like projects, right? And the only way is like if you are a private investor, you invest in some of these rounds, and the many crypto VCs that will focus on AI have actually invested in some of these projects. And eventually they'll probably launch a token. So I think if that sector actually when someone actually starts, because that's entirely new. It's a greenfield sector. No one has actually looked at it. There's no token right now that allows you to capture this narrative around like decentralized trading, right? And when the next protocol launches on this, and the first one or two, I think there's going to be just a huge amount of like attention, interest, and demand on that. So there's also another one that I'm sort of like watching. So I think, and then I'll just end off by saying that there are also a few other, there are probably going to be like some sectors in crypto AI that I have never even thought about. Like, I've never even thought it could be a sector or it could be a product. And I think that's the most interesting thing about crypto. People place a very big premium on novelty. And that's why agents really took off like last year. So what's going to be the next thing that sparks that attention and interest? I don't know what it is, but I'll be definitely watching out very closely for those.
For sure. You touched on a few like great points there. I actually want to dig into one of them, which is around, these private these sort of like the private investment side of things versus the fair launch side. Obviously this past year, we've definitely seen a shift towards more fair launches and sort of like even the pump fund style token launches, that sort of thing. But we've also seen, huge raises in the private sector as well for a lot of these crypto AI projects. Sort of wondering when we're sort of thinking about like the projects that could be launching this year, do you think, are we going to see the pendulum swing a bit back towards the private side, and are we going to see, these projects that have raised a lot of money from VCs? Are they going to be the ones that you think will launch at really high valuations, or do you think it's more going to be like still focused around these fair launch tokens?
That's a great question. I think it's going to be a mix of both. Like, so for one, is that there are a number of like very I think teams that are building some very solid products that are very much like infrastructure heavy. They have been pretty well funded by the VCs over the last 2 years or so. They're going to be launching products, and when you see the products that are out there, I think it's hard to say that these things are not legitimate. I think you're going to look at them, you're going to say, hey, this is really cool. This is great tech. I love what they're building. I love the vision. And people are going to come in, even though it might be a very typical, very VC focused token distribution, where VCs have gotten a good chunk of it because they invested in the very early stages where there was a lot of like technical risks around what these teams were building. But people will still come in, right? If the story and vision is good, I think these things can still get very high valuations. And I think like private investments are going to continue to be an important part of the crypto AI space, especially for teams that are building infrastructure, because like these things take a lot of time. They take a lot of very strong engineering teams, and which means that it's basically pretty capital intensive. And one way is really getting like VC investments to really fund all of that until you can actually get to your product launch. So that will continue to be. I think one trend we'll see is probably greater access for retail like myself and us to sort of participate in some of these private rounds. We've seen things like Legion, Echo, and all these that allow people who are not in funds to actually also, if they're willing to take a risk, also invest in some of these private rounds as well. So I think that is going to be a bit of a trend, which is a good thing. I think crypto also always like the people who are in crypto tend to be like mavericks. They like to really push boundaries of like what's going on in the space. They find a technology and they just try to experiment with it in all different ways. And then we're going to see a lot of all these like individual solo developers, small teams that are going to try out all these different cool stuff. And then because of just the nature of what they are, either they don't know or they haven't had the experience in terms of what it takes to build a startup in the traditional way, from fundraising and all of that, or they don't really want, or they're anon, right? And they don't want to be, I think there are all these teams that will prefer not to raise capital from VCs and just launch a product. And so we're going to also see all of these like stealth launches, fair launches, because it's just so easy, right? You can just spin up a token and just launch it like in an hour in crypto. Whereas and I think this is the only sector where you can really do something like this. And if what you're doing is cool, you're able to create a good story and narrative around what you're building, then demand will come because there's capital that's out there that's looking for these kind of things. So I think we're going to see a mix of these two different things that'll be there. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree with that perspective. I think like VCs will definitely like VC funding definitely has its place, and a lot of people were calling for that to like disappear. VC is dead. I heard that a few times, and I just don't really agree with that. On the whole, like I think there's obviously we got Legion and Echo allowing retail to get access to these rounds as well, which is super awesome. But particularly on the infrastructure side, like you said, it's very engineering intensive, capital intensive, and like people have to take risks for capital, and potentially when it's very technical as well, I think it's hard to create a very succinct narrative that retail can really like latch onto, and participate in that funding, or fair launch into that narrative, which is why I think like the likes of AI16Z and these other agent tokens that are fair launched, because it is kind of like viral, it's novel as well. I think that's why they've done quite well on the fair launch side. Whereas like, these other quite technical projects have opted to go the VC route. And I think that's, it makes a lot of sense as well. So yeah, I sort of tend to agree with you there. Just sort of touching back on another point that you made, and this is in relation to another one of your predictions, these compute marketplaces, and sort of comparing them with the L1 trade. I'm sort of interested to hear what you think about, like now we're seeing, this sort of shift from general purpose blockchains to more specialized blockchains. Do you think that's sort of going to take place with the compute marketplaces? Like I know there's some sort of emerging that have like specific use cases, but do you think that's like sort of a trend that we're going to continue to see? Like, are we going to see compute marketplaces that are really specifically focused on a particular service or something like that?
That's a very interesting sort of like angle to look at all of this. I think like how I would sort of like think about like compute marketplaces is actually looking beyond Web3 and what are the trends, right? What's the macro trends in compute that's happening right now in AI? So if we think about this, like in the past, maybe 2 years ago, right? A lot of the focus on compute was around like training AI models, right? And basically different teams wanted to aggregate more and more compute so that they can have enough like compute power to train some of these very large language models. AI startups are trying to were trying to train their own models as well, and they, if they didn't have access to like AWS or some of these like cloud service providers, they would have to sort of like find it through some of these other means, which includes like some of these GPU marketplaces that are out there. I think the trend is shifting a lot away from training into inference, and I think like Jensen Huang from NVIDIA also said that the demand for inference is going to grow like 1,000 times, 100,000 times. I think he also mentioned 1,000,000,000 times even. And I think that's very clear just because of a few things. Right? I think we're hitting a bit of a limit in terms of like how much we can improve the AI through training and pre-training. So that's one. But secondly, as people build out all of these like AI applications and make use of AI in their tools, as we use these apps that have in AI that's built into this, it's just going to require a huge amount of like compute capabilities also. So one thing, and one of the reasons like, at a very macro level why I think the compute marketplaces are very interesting to watch, because the demand for compute on a worldwide basis, I think, is insatiable. There isn't enough compute if we were to see all these applications stuff like get built out, right? The data centers that we have today, I'm going to be able to support this huge wave that's coming up, and it takes time to build up these data centers, build up this infrastructure. So people are going to start to look at these decentralized like GPU marketplaces that are able to aggregate compute from our homes, from people's computers, from gaming laptops, and use this as one of the other sources of compute. And inference is a lot less heavy dependence compared to training. Like you don't need a top tier GPU to be able to do some of these inference work, especially if you use some of these newer techniques like model sharding and stuff on this. So I think that at the macro level is going to drive a lot of demand and real revenue generation from these marketplaces. I think among the going back to your question around the L1 trade and these compute marketplaces, I think just because the market is so big, everyone's going to have their own sort of like slight flavor to this. I don't think it's going to be a one winner takes all sort of like market. Like even if we look beyond in terms of like what the hyperscalers are today, we have AWS, we have like Microsoft Azure, we have Google Cloud provider. So there are multiple different winners, and they're not like particularly differentiated among each other. It's just that they have their different set of clients and all that. So I think the same thing will also happen with these marketplaces. They'll cultivate their own community, their own group of people that will be using their tooling, and they'll be comfortable with their tooling. And so we're going to see a number of these marketplaces grow pretty big. I don't necessarily think that it's going to be a single player that will just take this entire market. But also, we are still in the very early days. This whole thing will probably take a bit of time to play out.
Definitely agree on the importance of these decentralized compute marketplaces. I think we had a discussion with Gregor Suri from Akash Network a few weeks ago, and he was sort of discussing the actual energy side of things and the energy infrastructure that's required for powering all this compute and these data centers. And we've obviously seen the likes of Microsoft go out and strike up these 20-year deals with nuclear power plants so that they can get access to reliable power to power the data centers. But there's only so many nuclear power plants, and you can't just spin up a nuclear power plant overnight. They take years and years to build. And I believe, I could be slightly wrong on this, but I believe we're either, all the nuclear power plants in the US anyway have been already signed for deals, or we're nearing that point. So definitely agree that this sort of like unlocking this decentralized compute is going to be really key for the space. And I obviously agree. I agree with the inference is definitely less intensive, and it makes a lot of sense for inference to be pushed onto this decentralized compute network. But then again, decentralized, we've made such a great progress with decentralized training. And recently Exo Labs came out with their smarter algorithm, and I think we've just talked about this before. I think it's mentioned in your chain of thought piece about the predictions that it actually can be used with other algorithms as well, from the likes of NAS research or Prime Intellect, and sort of compound the effectiveness, which I think is just incredible.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I think personally, I think the point you made about energy makes so much sense, because I think a lot of people, when they think about like compute, the first thing, and I used to think about this as well, like, the first thing is really is like GPUs, right? Like, so compute equals like GPUs. But that's not necessarily true. If you think about like what goes into building a data center, there are a lot more components than just the chip itself. You have to think about cooling, you have to think about physical location, you have to think about energy, and energy is usually the biggest constraint in terms of like building some of these like newer and mega data centers. Because if you build a very big like data center with like 10,000 GPUs, you're going to absorb a lot of power away from a group of people, and building a power infrastructure takes time and effort. So the people living near the data center are going to find that their electricity just gets shut off every now and then. So I wouldn't want to be staying near that. But it is a very big constraint, and that's why sometimes I think like building these networks in a distributed way and using these compute networks makes a lot of sense to me, right? If we can figure out some of these like technical constraints around bandwidth and all of that, and we can overcome this, then it becomes very powerful. Same thing with decentralized training, like you mentioned, because in such early days around this, like people haven't really started exploring these things in earnest until only about the last 2-3 years or so. That's why I think there's still so many gains to be made, right? And we're seeing like new progress, new kinds of techniques that are just, it's not like super groundbreaking, but it's just a new way of like thinking about how you might do something, that's super cool. And all of these like different efficiency gains are going to start to compound on each other, and that's how we get to that progress. Right? It's not going to be. I don't think it's going to be a single team that suddenly makes a very big breakthrough, and with this technique, suddenly we unlock everything. It's going to be a lot of these like innovation and progress that teams like Nose, Prime Intellect, and Exolabs are making, and then they all feed on each other, and then we get finally to a stage where all of this actually becomes practical and useful. And I'm here to see that.
Totally. I think it's super exciting. I think, I mean, you mentioned it earlier as well. It'll be interesting to see how crypto is incorporated with these projects as well, because it does seem like there's, these projects are like sort of inadvertently tied with crypto. And I'm sort of wondering how those two sort of intersect, and like how crypto economic incentives can actually be used, in this decentralized training sort of space. That's something that I haven't quite wrapped my head around, but I'm very interested to see what these teams come out with.
I think it's going to be, I mean, just on that token stuff, you're absolutely right. Like, I feel like that's one part that can be a bit tricky, right? How do you design the right kind of like token incentive model to make sure that everyone's aligned towards growing your network? And I feel like for many of these teams, it's really around that. It's less about, especially the teams that already have a lot of like venture funding. Tokens are good for two things. One is basically raising funds, and second is really around aligning all the different participants to make the network grow as big as possible. And I think for these teams that are pretty well funded already, I think it's more towards the latter. And if you make some pretty bad, like you can have a very good product but a very bad token design, and that will kill you. That will kill your startup, right? So it's a bit of a tricky area, and it is a bit of a concern for me as well, because like some of these teams are extremely smart. They have like the best people who know everything about AI. They know what's going on in the latest space. They have very strong engineering capabilities. But where they may need some help, or where they is really on the crypto and the Web3 side, where they may not be as familiar around these, right? So we're going to see some of these. I hope we get to some really cool, sustainable like token economic models.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, we've seen quite a few. Well, I sort of had quite a deep look at different predictions for 2025 over the past few weeks, from people in crypto, people in AI, and people just, other people just generally. And there was a lot of mention of like, this is a year of tokenization. And, we're going to see a lot of tokenization, even sort of like outside of crypto. And there's like talk of RWAs and all this sort of stuff. And I think, like to your point, these people can be really smart in their sort of field, but crypto is its own beast. And if you sort of get the token structure wrong for your product or your project, it can spell the end of your project. Like, it can just be an absolute disaster. And we've seen that in the past with like particularly around airdrops as well. The community gets all angry, and then it's your fault, and the free money wasn't enough, all this sort of stuff. So I am really interested to see what they come out with, particularly around this. I think it's a super interesting space, but yeah, I think it's going to be tricky to get it right, I would say.
For sure. I think a good thing is that at least we'll probably see a number of like new launches that are not just token, but they actually have a product behind them, and a solid product. Like, I think a lot of the stuff we've seen in previous cycles, especially, and maybe even quite a bit now in the AI agent space, is that there are a lot of teams that are just entirely focused on the token. The token is the entire product, and there's really nothing else besides the token, right? And that also doesn't make sense. That you can have very good Ponzi, or have some kind of like design, or have a very good way of like creating attention around your token, but also at the end of the day, if you have no product behind it, it's not going to be sustainable, and you just get these kind of like almost like pump and dumps for this, which doesn't give our industry a good look. So I'm optimistic. I think we'll figure out that very good balance between like product and token.
Definitely agree. Jumping into slightly different prediction, but tangential, is I think it's relevant right now. 99% of crypto AI agents will die, and only the useful ones will survive. I think we're already starting to see this. The likes of Truth Terminal and Goat, had this massive initial run up, and now it's just slow bleeding towards zero, it seems like. And these other newer agents with potentially, you know, different characteristics that are a bit more useful, surviving and actually gaining market share and mind share over the top of these original agents that were first launched just as purely entertainment. Um, so yeah, I think this is like a really interesting phenomenon that's going to happen. And just like I was mentioning to you earlier about Raoul Pal jumping on a stream with Thread Guy, and he was talking about his thoughts on crypto AI, and AI expertise commenting in the comments, going, "Oh, Raoul," I think Raoul was saying that he wasn't super bullish on the crypto AI space or something along those lines. And AI expertise like, "Oh, Raoul doesn't know what he's talking about." And then following the stream, Raoul posted a screenshot of some of the agents in his comments and was sort of like, "This is my point." And it was just, basically a bunch of agents saying the exact same thing. Very obviously, very simple, basic GPT or Claude outputs, very generic and not very value additive. So yeah, I definitely think this is, this prediction I agree with a lot, and I'm sort of getting to the point of being sick of all these different agents and trying to figure out what's different about this one compared to this one. How's the token even tied in with the agent? Is it just a meme coin with a Twitter account? All this sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm not sure if you had any additional thoughts there.
Yeah, first I'll say is that I'm glad to hear that Raul is skeptical about the crypto AI space, and it's great because like if everyone's like super excited about crypto AI, like both of us are, I think we're probably topped, right? And there's no one else that's gonna come in and feel that okay, this is gonna be super cool, and I'll be definitely a bit worried about that. And I love to see y'all having that very good dose of skepticism around this because it keeps things real, for sure. So I think that's one initial thought. I think the barriers to entry in crypto are very low. Like you can launch an agent, you can launch a token that's tied to your agent like very quickly. Doesn't take a lot of effort. And that means there are just gonna be a lot of like projects. There are a lot of like teams, a lot of people launching stuff. And that's why I think, these skeptics are right in some way. Like I think like Kyle Samani from Multicoin is also a very big skeptic around AI agents. He's been tweeting a lot about like how he hasn't seen any real value that comes out of this, and he doesn't know why is there so much like interest around some of these things. The truth is that 99 or maybe even 99.9% of these things actually have no real value besides like maybe some novelty, some speculation or so. But I think it's that 0.1% of stuff is going to be what pushes the boundaries. It's going to be what that changes some of these things, because the ideas that people are throwing around make a lot of sense, right? AI agents redefining every single application that we do. AI agents living on chain. AI agents being the ones that are performing all the transactions, making payments for us, communicating with each other, creating that whole agentic economy. I think these ideas are somewhat futuristic, but they do make sense to me, and I can definitely see that future sort of like playing out. The question is like, how do we get there? How many failures do we have to see before that actually potentially we find that one or two teams or projects that are actually able to make this vision sort of like come to reality? So yeah, who knows? So I think that's true, and that's why I say like, I think 99% of what's happening today, of these agents will probably, what will happen is that either these agents will just stop working because agents, they can't run infinitely. They need compute power in order to continue to keep running. And either their creators will get bored and they'll shut off. They decide they don't want to pay the bills, whatever they're using, their AWS bills or their inference bills from like GPT-4. And then these agents will just stop working, and you will see lots of this. It almost seems a little bit like what happened with NFTs back in 2021 to 2022, where everyone will be launching an NFT project, but if you look at it today, like most of the teams have pretty much abandoned their projects and nothing's really happening except for a few that are still like doing super well, like Pudgy, Azuki, and all of that. So I think something like that will also really happen in the AI agent space.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think just to add a small point onto that as well, I think it'll be interesting to see how existing agents, especially the ones that have actually managed to capture some capital, in this like initial mania phase, how they actually turn themselves from just being purely entertainment agents and transition into becoming useful agents, and in like utilizing some of the infrastructure that comes online to develop some sort of usefulness beyond just being entertaining. I think that's really interesting. And I think we're sort of starting to see that with these different projects creating these launch pads and that sort of thing. I'm not 100% sure if that's like the sort of end game. Like if there's all these launch pads, like it's hard to sort of differentiate yourself beyond what we talked about earlier in terms of like the developer language and that sort of thing. So yeah, super interesting space. But Tang, I know we're about to come up on time. So was there any closing thoughts at all before we wrap it up?
Well, I think we covered a lot in crypto AI. I'll just say that there's so much that's going to happen this year that I wouldn't have even been able to sort of like foresee. Just taking like what happened in 2024, for example. So I think the same thing is going to happen this year, and I think the people who will sort of like win are those who are keeping informed, staying, being attentive, like seeing what's going on, and keeping a very open mind. Right, I think there are going to be things that will just we'll think like it's entirely crazy, it doesn't make sense, but we will look back in hindsight and realize that, hey, actually this is what is actually pushing the boundaries and making really cool stuff happen. So I think pay attention, keep an open mind is how like we all will sort of like win in this space.
Awesome. Yeah, totally agree with you. Tang, it was a great chat. Thanks so much. And for anyone listening, go and check out Chain of Thought. Tang's 2025 predictions are there to read in full. I highly recommend them. I think they're great predictions. We'll see how they play out. Maybe we can do a podcast at the start of 2026 and do a bit of a reflection and see what happened. But yeah, awesome. Tang, let's wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me, Paddy. This was really fun, and yeah, I think the best part of predictions is just looking back and seeing how wrong I was like back in 2026. So we definitely should try back on all of this. But yeah, thanks for having me, man. I always love having these conversations, and hope to be back on again soon.
No problem. Catch you, man.